Imagine soothing a child's toothache with mashed dead mouse, or swallowing ground-up mummies to cure a fever. These aren't myths. They're real remedies from our past. In humanity's darkest hours, people turned to the strangest cures, hoping for healing. What drove them? Desperation or belief? Tonight, we uncover the truths behind ancient medicine. You're lying still, wrapped in warm covers, but imagine being wrapped in linen soaked in resin for eternity. In Renaissance Europe, physicians crushed something once sacred, ground up remains of ancient Egyptian mummies. Known as mumia, this powder was believed to cure everything from headaches to plague. You'd buy it from an apothecary, thinking you were swallowing ancient healing magic. It smelled of dust, incense, and decay, and people paid dearly for it. Why? Because ancient cultures preserved their dead with resins and herbs thought to have healing powers. Over time, those same materials, still clinging to bone, were mistaken for the cure itself. A sort of medicinal archaeology, if you will. Royal families, nobles, even painters like Van Gogh took it. Sometimes, blood and bone were believed to carry divine power. Did it work? Not really. The supposed healing was placebo, or perhaps worse, exposure to long-trapped bacteria. But in a time when illness had no clear cause, even sacred dust felt like hope. Tonight, as you lie safe in your bed, remember that once, across candle-lit shelves, humanity tried to consume history in order to heal itself. And isn't it curious how something meant to preserve the dead was once thought to preserve the living? Hey friends, dim the lights. We're stepping into a plague-ridden street somewhere in 14th century Europe. Bells toll in the distance. And in your satchel, a pouch of garlic. Not for cooking, but survival. People hung garlic around their necks, chewed it raw, rubbed it on skin. Why? Because it smelled strong enough, they believed, to ward off bad air, the miasma thought to cause the Black Death. In markets, garlic bulbs were sold alongside candles and crosses. Herbalists swore by its powers. Monks grew it in abbey gardens, calling it the poor man's armor. Even plague doctors sometimes tucked cloves inside their beaked masks. The irony: garlic does have antibacterial properties, thanks to a compound called allicin. It wouldn't have cured the plague, but it may have fended off lesser infections. A small comfort, perhaps, in a terrifying time. And the scent? Overpowering. But to the frightened soul walking through death-laced streets, it was the scent of protection. So next time you smell garlic simmering on the stove, remember, it once meant life or death. And isn't it gentle irony that something so ordinary once stood between humanity and fear? You are right now stepping into a tent, somewhere on a Bronze Age battlefield. The clash has ended. Silence returns, and wounds must be tended. Instead of gauze or antiseptic, someone leans in with a pot of golden honey. Yes, honey. Sweet, sticky, soothing. Ancient healers used it for thousands of years, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, to treat cuts, burns, and ulcers. Why? Because honey doesn't just cover, it fights. Its low water content and acidity create an unfriendly place for bacteria. And that's not all. Honey produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide, making it naturally antimicrobial. In papyrus scrolls and clay tablets, honey was praised as divine nectar. Greeks smeared it on battle wounds. Romans packed it into bandages. Even in World War I, field medics sometimes turned back to honey when other supplies ran low. And the feeling? Imagine a warm glaze sealing your wound, calming the sting, preserving the skin. Today, we have laboratory dressings with silver and iodine. But deep in the annals of time, nature's golden syrup was already doing the job. So as you drift off, think about this. Something made by bees, meant to feed their young quietly saved human lives for millennia. And that's a sweet little miracle, isn't it? Let's step gently into the highlands of Peru, nearly 2,000 years ago. You see a healer with a knife of obsidian, preparing to open the skull of a man in pain. This was trepanation, the act of drilling or scraping a hole into the cranium, and it wasn't punishment. It was medicine. Across many ancient cultures, Incas, Greeks, even Neolithic tribes, trepanation was used to treat everything from migraines to seizures to evil spirits. They believed that pressure, pain, or madness could escape through the hole. Surprisingly, many patients survived. Bones show signs of healing. Techniques evolved: circular drills, scraping methods, care to avoid damaging the brain. Some were likely war wounds, others ritual or remedy. And what did it feel like? No anesthesia, only herbal sedatives. The procedure was terrifying, and yet in some ways it worked. For skull trauma or pressure, relief may have followed. Tonight, while your thoughts drift gently beneath a peaceful skull, remember the bravery it took to trust in such a strange cure. And isn't it astounding how early humans dared to open the mind in search of healing? Let's rewind to a riverbank in 400 BCE, where Hippocrates, the famed Greek physician, advised his patients to chew on willow bark. The reason? Pain relief. Willow trees, especially their white bark, contain a compound called salicin. Once inside the body, salicin converts to salicylic acid, an early cousin of modern aspirin. For centuries, herbalists across Europe, China, and the Middle East brewed willow tea or made poultices to reduce fever and inflammation. It was a slow medicine, bitter, earthy, and hard on the stomach, but it soothed aching joints, calmed headaches, and brought down fevers. Even the Aztecs used it. Eventually, in the 1800s, chemists refined salicin into acetyl salicylic acid, aspirin as we know it. But its roots? Right there in the soil beneath a rustling willow tree. So next time you reach for a pill, remember a time when healing meant walking to the river, stripping bark, boiling tea, and waiting. Isn't it comforting to know that the cure you swallow today once grew quietly beside a stream? You are lying on your stomach in an ancient Chinese village. The room smells faintly of herbs and lamp oil. Then comes the warmth and the gentle suction. Cupping therapy has been practiced for over 2,000 years. Glass, bamboo, or horn cups were heated, then placed on the skin to create suction. The goal? To draw out stagnant qi or toxins from the body, often for muscle pain, lung congestion, or fatigue. It wasn't just China. Egyptians used cupping too. So did Greeks. Even medieval physicians left circular marks on their patients, proof of treatment. The sensation? Odd, but not painful. A deep pull, a bloom of purple that fades in days. It was believed to reawaken the body's flow, like clearing a blocked stream. Modern science sees cupping as modestly effective for muscle tension. It boosts circulation, possibly calms nerves. No magic, but no harm either. So tonight, as you let go of your own tension, imagine those warm glass cups pulling away the day's burdens. And isn't it beautiful how even a simple lift of skin was once believed to lift the soul? Hey, friends. Take a deep breath. This story starts beside a calm, marshy pond, where the water ripples with quiet life. For much of ancient and medieval medicine, balance was everything. The body was thought to contain 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and illness meant imbalance. So, to restore harmony, bloodletting. Leeches, slippery and silent, became the doctor's favorite tool. From Egypt to India to Renaissance Europe, they were placed on patients' skin to draw blood gently. Unlike knives, leeches didn't overbleed. They numbed the skin. They let go when full. It sounds strange now, but for fevers, swelling, even love sickness, people turned to these creatures of the mud. Royal physicians carried velvet leech boxes. Apothecaries bred them in ponds. And oddly, they worked. In some cases, like relieving blood pressure or swelling, leeches helped. Today, they're used again in microsurgery to prevent clotting and restore blood flow. So next time you're near a quiet stream, think of the humble leech, both feared and revered. And maybe, just maybe, balance comes from the most unexpected places. You are walking a dusty path through Roman Britain. The healer greets you with solemn eyes and a pouch of ash. Yes, burnt hedgehog. Romans believed the ashes of this spiny creature, mixed with wine or water, could help with bladder stones or difficulty urinating. The hedgehog, with its curling nature, was thought to mimic the tightness and flow of the body's own passages. It wasn't just superstition. Ash contains minerals like potassium and calcium, which could, in small ways, shift the body's balance. But the real reason? Sympathetic magic. If a creature looked like the problem, it might help the cure. The hedgehog, earthy, shy, curled into itself, became a symbol of constriction, and its ashes, oddly, a path to relief. No, it didn't truly work, but it shows how humans once turned to nature not just for medicine, but metaphor. So as you curl beneath your blanket tonight, think of the curled little hedgehog, once seen not just as a creature, but as a quiet remedy. And isn't it curious how healing once came with quills? In 19th century America, snake oil was sold from wagons as a miracle cure. But the idea wasn't born in Cannes. It came from Chinese railway workers who used real snake fat, especially from water snakes, to soothe joint pain. Rich in omega-3, it truly reduced inflammation. American entrepreneurs copied the idea, but replaced the oil with mineral grease, turpentine, or worse. Still, the name stuck. The real snake oil? Surprisingly effective, but the fakes made it infamous. So next time someone says snake oil, smile a little, because once upon a time it wasn't a scam, it was a balm. And isn't it strange how truth and trickery can share the same bottle? You're now in ancient Egypt, inside a clay-walled home, listening to a child cry from aching gums. The healer brings a dead mouse. It's mashed with herbs and applied as a paste to the sore tooth. Why? Mice were thought to contain special vitality, quick, warm-blooded, always gnawing. Their spirit, perhaps, would drive out the pain. Greek and Roman texts echo this cure. In Tudor England, similar pastes were made. The logic? A bite for a bite. Sympathetic healing. Of course, it didn't really work. And today, we shudder. But for those without dentists, anesthesia, or options, a mouse was a strange kind of comfort. So as you smile tonight, pain-free, imagine how deep human hope runs, even into the smallest creatures. And isn't it oddly touching how far we'll go just to stop a tooth from hurting? Hey friends, ease into your breath and picture a quiet room in Han Dynasty China, soft incense curling through the air. A healer leans in with a fine bronze needle, not to cut, but to balance. This is acupuncture, 2,000 years old and still practiced today. It began with sharpened stones, then metal needles. Inserted gently into the skin along meridians, these points were believed to guide the body's energy, or qi. The concept was simple, yet poetic. Illness came when energy became blocked. The needle, like a key, unlocked it. Even emperors used acupuncture. Ancient medical texts mapped hundreds of points. Sometimes they burned mugwort, a practice called moxibustion, near the needle to enhance effect. And the sensation? A tingle, a pulse, a whisper through the nerves. Some say pain vanished like smoke. Modern science still debates the full extent, but evidence shows acupuncture can relieve certain kinds of pain, nausea, even stress. From war generals to workers, millions have found quiet in the needle's touch. So tonight, let your breath slow. Imagine those ancient hands guiding energy like rivers beneath your skin. And isn't it beautiful? How healing once flowed through silence and steel? You're in a Roman camp at dusk. The air smells of leather, dust, and strong red wine. A soldier's leg is bleeding, but instead of panic, someone pours wine straight into the wound. It stings, but it helps. For centuries, wine wasn't just for celebration. It was medicine. High in alcohol, mildly acidic, and easy to carry, wine was used as an early antiseptic. Physicians from Galen to Avicenna praised its cleansing power. Wounds were bathed in it, surgical tools dipped in it. Sometimes, herbs were infused to make medicinal wine. Even during the Crusades, battlefield surgeons used wine-soaked cloth. It wasn't sterile, but it was safer than stagnant water. The smell of spiced wine in sick rooms, the shine of a bronze cup beside a cot, all part of an ancient ritual of care. Of course, modern antiseptics are stronger, but in a time without antibiotics, a goblet of wine was often the cleanest thing around. So next time you see wine swirling in a glass, remember, it once swirled over wounds. And isn't it tender to know that comfort once came in crimson form? Dear listener, let's gently tiptoe into the strange halls of ancient Egyptian medicine. In dusty scrolls known as the Eber's Papyrus, you find a recipe: crocodile dung mixed with honey, inserted to prevent pregnancy. Strange? Certainly. But they believed it worked. The idea? The dung formed a physical barrier, like early spermicides. Its texture, its acidity, maybe even its symbolism, fierce, fertile, protective, were part of the logic. And honey added natural stickiness and antimicrobial properties. Crocodiles were sacred in Egypt, associated with protection and fertility, so perhaps their essence was seen as strong enough to shield life itself. Historians debate how effective this method really was. Most likely, not very. But it reveals something deeper. A culture grappling with life, risk, and the sacred act of control. So tonight, as you rest in comfort and choice, remember a time when even the most fearsome creatures were recruited into medicine. And isn't it humbling how human ingenuity reaches through even the wildest things? You are now peering into the mirror of ancient Mesopotamia. Your eyes sting. The air is dry. What do you reach for? A blend of soot and pig fat, gently dabbed beneath the lids. This was kohl, part cosmetic, part cure. Made from burnt almond shells or antimony, it was believed to protect the eyes from glare, infection, and evil spirits. The fat kept the mix stable. The soot absorbed light. It lined the eyes like a shield. Even Cleopatra wore it. But here's the surprise. Studies show kohl may have had real antibacterial effects. Some versions produced low levels of nitric oxide, which helps the immune system fight infections. And in desert lands where eye ailments were common, protection, both spiritual and physical, mattered deeply. So the next time you see eyeliner sweep across a lid, think of this: a medicine that doubled as beauty, as ritual, as armor. And isn't it lovely how healing and adornment once walked hand in hand? Hey friends, take a warm breath and imagine a rustic kitchen in medieval France. There's a loaf of bread. It's green, but it's not thrown out, it's medicine. Moldy bread was once pressed into wounds to stop infection. Healers would wrap it in cloth and bind it to cuts. Why? Because even before we knew what penicillin was, mold, especially penicillium, was working quietly in the background. Ancient Egyptians did it. So did Greeks and Slavs. In rural Europe, it became folk wisdom. Don't waste the moldy part. Use it. Was it always effective? No. Some molds were harmful. But when the right species grew, without anyone knowing why, it sometimes saved lives. And the thought behind it? That nature, even in decay, could heal. So tonight, if something seems ruined or spoiled, think again. Isn't it strangely hopeful that even rot can carry a remedy? You're walking along a damp riverbank in ancient China, picking up wriggling earthworms, not for fishing, but for healing. Crushed into poultices or dried into powder, earthworms were applied to inflamed joints and abscesses. The belief? That their slippery nature mirrored the flow of energy in the body and could unblock swelling or pain. And science? Modern studies show certain enzymes in worms reduce inflammation and help break down clots. Healers believed worms brought the earth's cool, slow rhythm, grounded, humble, undistracted, just as the body should be. So next time you see a worm after rain, think about the wisdom wriggling beneath our feet. And isn't it curious how the lowliest creatures offered high forms of healing? You are now seated in a dark cottage in 17th century Scotland. A sick child wheezes. The healer offers powdered goat lung swallowed with milk or beer. It seems odd now, but tuberculosis, once called consumption, was a feared wasting disease, and folk belief leaned into like cures like. The goat, breathing steadily on highland slopes, was thought to lend its strength through its lungs. Some preparations involved drying the organ, grinding it fine, and mixing it with herbs like thyme or anise. Did it work? Likely not, but it offered a kind of symbolic transference. Hope passed from one breath to another. So tonight, take a long, easy breath, feel it fill your lungs, and think. Healing once began with the breath of another creature. Dear listener, we now enter a Mongolian steppe, where wind hums low across the grasslands. A healer holds a pouch. Inside, dried bare gallbladder. Bitter and pungent, it was prized for treating liver ailments. In traditional Chinese medicine, bear bile was said to cool the liver, reduce heat, and restore harmony. Why the bear? It symbolized endurance. Its gall, full of bile salts like ursodeoxycholic acid, could, in rare cases, help dissolve gallstones or treat liver inflammation. The tragedy. Many bears were hunted or farmed, a practice now condemned. Still, this cure shows how ancient medicine walked between reverence and cost. So tonight, let your thoughts curl gently, like a sleeping bear, and wonder, can healing exist without harm? You are seated beside a fire in a Roman villa. A servant brings a clay bowl with gray ash, powdered ox hoof, mixed in wine. This was a remedy for indigestion, diarrhea, even poisoning. Why hooves? Because they were tough, earthy, and believed to contain grounding properties. Their ash was alkaline, which may have soothed excess stomach acid. Romans cataloged hundreds of such ashes, each with its own internal symbolism. The hard, the slow, the grounded, consumed to counter the quick and chaotic. It may not have worked, but the ritual itself calmed. So next time your stomach flutters, think of how ancient people ate ashes to feel whole again. And isn't it quietly poetic, turning hardship into balance? Hey friends, let's end tonight's chapter on a softer note, with something gentle. In ancient Greece and Rome, a child with an earache would be soothed with warm olive oil. A few drops, heated gently, were poured into the ear canal. The warmth calmed. The oil softened wax and perhaps eased infection. This cure persisted for centuries, in shepherd huts, monasteries, and seaside homes. Even today, some pediatricians nod to the tradition, not a cure-all, but a comfort. And isn't that what healing often is? Warmth, familiarity, a quiet touch. So as you drift off tonight, imagine the hush of an olive grove and a mother's hand cradling a child's ear. That's medicine, too. Hey, friends, if you're enjoying this gentle journey through forgotten cures, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. You're in an ancient Greek courtyard, early morning. The marble floor is cool beneath your feet. A boy scrapes his knee, and someone calls for the dog. The family hound pads over and gently licks the wound. This wasn't just affection. Ancient physicians like Aristotle believed that dog saliva had healing properties. The Greeks noted that dogs instinctively licked their own injuries and often healed well. So, why not apply that instinct to humans? The belief wasn't entirely misplaced. Dog saliva contains enzymes and antimicrobial compounds like lysozyme. In some cases, it may have helped clean wounds, especially in a world without soap or antibiotics. Romans encouraged the practice. Some Egyptian scrolls even prescribed letting a sacred dog lick certain infections. The act was gentle, instinctual, oddly comforting. Of course, we now know saliva can carry dangerous bacteria too. But in a time of herbal poultices and whispered prayers, nature's softest touch sometimes felt like enough. So as you close your eyes tonight, picture a warm snout, a wagging tail, and the strange kindness found in creatures beside us. Isn't it beautiful that healing once came on 4 legs? Hey friends, tonight, let's sift gently through a bowl of crushed eggshells. In medieval Europe and earlier, healers often prescribed powdered eggshells for those with brittle bones, aching joints, or even teething infants. Ground finely, mixed with wine or honey, it was believed to replenish strength. The reasoning was simple. Eggshells were hard, white, and protective. They resembled bone, and through the lens of sympathetic medicine could restore like. But beyond metaphor, eggshells contain calcium carbonate, a true building block of bones and teeth. When prepared properly, they can supplement calcium intake even today. In apothecaries' records, you'll find entries like shell of 2 hens, dried and ground, for the elderly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was humble, nourishing, and often free. And the process? Gentle roasting, slow grinding, stirring into warm milk, a ritual as old as comfort itself. So tonight, as your body rests and restores itself, remember this small, forgotten cure from the breakfast table. And isn't it lovely how life's most fragile containers held quiet strength? You are walking through a golden field in ancient India. Cows graze nearby, their presence sacred. In traditional Ayurvedic practice, gomutra, cow urine, was used as a healing tonic. Believed to balance the body's doshas, it was applied for skin issues, digestion, even spiritual cleansing. To Western ears, it may sound odd, but within the cultural and spiritual framework of Vedic life, the cow was pure, nurturing, almost maternal. Its byproducts were not waste, but gifts. Modern studies have explored some antimicrobial properties in fermented cow urine, but the real power was symbolic, a connection to nature, humility, and devotion. It was often mixed with herbs, ghee, or honey, then sipped in ritual settings. Not every use was effective, but the intention, wholeness, balance, harmony, remains timeless. So tonight, think of a world where nothing was discarded, and healing meant honoring every part of life. Isn't that a gentle philosophy, one drop at a time? You're in a wooden cabin on a misty morning. A child coughs, the sound echoing through rough-hewn walls. The grandmother peels an onion, slices it thin, warms it gently, and lays it across the child's chest. Wrapped in cloth, it begins to release its warmth and scent. Onion poultices were a common remedy for chest congestion. Rich in sulfur compounds, onions were believed to draw out infection, thin mucus, and ease breathing. And from Russia to rural America, this folk cure crossed continents. Some boiled the onions first, others sautéed them in lard. The smell lingered, but so did the relief. Modern science nods to onions' mild antimicrobial effects. While not a cure, they can indeed reduce inflammation and support respiratory comfort. And the feeling? Humble, homemade, and full of care. So as you breathe slowly tonight, picture the quiet power of the onion, layered, tearful, warming the heart and lungs. Isn't it comforting that even kitchen scraps once held healing? Hey friends, dim the lights and brace for a small leap into strangeness. In medieval Europe, A common cure for sore throats involved boiling a frog in water, then either drinking the broth or applying it warm to the neck. The belief that the frog's moisture, voice, or even sacrifice could soothe the throat. Some recipes involved suspending a live frog over the mouth, letting its breath draw out the illness. Others focused on the cooked essence, especially when mixed with herbs. Strange as it sounds, frog skin contains antimicrobial peptides. Modern scientists are studying them for medicine. Was medieval frog broth effective? Maybe in ways they didn't understand, but mostly it was symbolic. The frog, creature of water and voice, offered healing to the hoarse and hurting. So tonight, as your voice quiets for sleep, remember the gentle weirdness of old remedies. And isn't it sweet how the creatures we hush at night once hushed our pain? You are seated beside a flickering hearth in an Ottoman household. A bowl of pigeon broth steams in your hands. For centuries, pigeon soup was prescribed for the ill, especially those with weak hearts or poor blood. The bird was considered light, nourishing, and easy to digest. Its meat, said to be rich in iron and vitality, was served to new mothers and the elderly. In ancient Persia, Rome, and later Europe, pigeon meat appeared in hospital menus. The idea wasn't magic, it was sustenance. Gentle protein, slow-cooked for the soul. Sometimes herbs like rosemary or garlic were added, sometimes dates or barley. Always slow, always careful. There was no placebo here, just a quiet faith in food as medicine. So tonight, if you feel weary or tender, imagine a warm bowl in your hands, made not to cure, but to comfort. And isn't that healing too? Dear listener, take a deep breath and picture a Roman soldier dressing his wound, but instead of cloth, he presses in a spider web. Yes, spider silk. Across Rome, Greece, and China, fine webs were gathered, cleaned, and layered into cuts. The belief? That they stopped bleeding and sealed the skin. Spider silk is strong, elastic, and full of vitamin K, important for clotting. Some even mixed it with vinegar or honey for extra effect. The process was slow, finding the right webs, collecting them undamaged, laying them smooth. But the result? A natural bandage, delicate as lace, strong as thread. Today, scientists study spider silk for sutures and synthetic skin. But long ago, it was already in use, tucked in pouches beside herbs and knives. So tonight, if you feel frayed or wounded, think of the smallest weavers helping skin rethread itself. Isn't it amazing how nature stitched us back together? You are now walking the edge of a desert in ancient Persia. A healer carries a pouch of dried meat, viper, carefully prepared. Some believed that eating viper flesh, or rubbing oil infused with it, could treat paralysis, tremors, or muscle weakness. The snake, fluid and strong, was thought to pass on its motion. The logic again was symbolic. Motion heals stillness. Fear heals weakness. Venom cures affliction. In some cases, the venom was neutralized by drying or cooking. In others, the treatment may have caused harm. But the story? It's one of metaphor and desperation. Snakes shed their skin. Perhaps patients longed to shed theirs too, to become something renewed. So tonight, as you rest still and quiet, remember those who reached into danger for a chance at movement. Isn't that courage disguised as a cure? Hey friends, take a quiet moment. Picture soft earth, scooped gently from a riverbank. In cultures from West Africa to the American South, people once ate clay, carefully selected, dried, and powdered, to soothe upset stomachs. This practice, called geophagy, was often ritual, sometimes medicinal. Clay absorbs toxins. It binds to bacteria. Some types carry trace minerals. Pregnant women craved it. Children too, not as food, but as remedy. Ancient Greeks recommended white clay for digestive issues. Native American tribes used it for nausea. Even in Victorian times, powdered loam was sold in chemist shops. Was it effective? Occasionally, but it was also risky, depending on the source. Still, the instinct to turn to the earth for balance is old, deep, and oddly wise. So tonight, grounded and still, imagine the world beneath your feet, also offering care. Isn't it grounding how soil once healed the stomach? You are now in an imperial court in ancient China. A concubine sips tea laced with crushed pearls. It sparkles faintly, like moonlight. Pearls were believed to nourish the skin, calm the spirit, and lengthen life. Crushed into powder, they were stirred into tonics or used in cosmetics. The logic? Pearls grew inside living creatures, slowly, perfectly. To consume one was to invite beauty from within. Modern studies show pearl powder contains calcium and trace minerals. It might help skin or bone health, but the real effect was in ritual and belief. Royal physicians prescribed pearl for anxiety, aging, and heartbreak, and sometimes for dreams. So as you drift into sleep tonight, think of a cup glowing softly in candlelight, and the idea that beauty, dissolved, could become peace. Isn't that a delicate thought to end the evening? Hey friends, dim the lights and breathe gently, but not too deeply for this one. In some indigenous North American tribes, as well as in early Slavic medicine, a curious cure for toothaches was practiced. Blowing smoke into the mouth. Pine smoke, birch bark, even dried herbs like sage or chamomile were burned. Then the warm smoke was funneled toward the aching tooth. Why? The heat soothed, the aromatic oils numbed, and perhaps the ritual itself eased the nerves. Some used hollow reeds, others gently fanned it in with feathers. The feeling? Tingly, distracting, oddly calming. Modern science hints that certain burned resins and herbs contain mild analgesic or anti-inflammatory compounds. But mostly it was the sensation, the warmth, the smell, the rhythm that dulled the pain. So tonight, as the air turns still, imagine that soft curl of smoke lifting discomfort into the sky. Isn't it gentle that healing once came on the breath of trees? You are standing on a rocky shore in ancient Syria. The sun has just set, and someone hands you a small bowl of fish liver oil. It's thick, strong, not pleasant. But if your eyes struggle in darkness, this was once the answer. Fish liver oil, especially from cod or shark, was used for night blindness. The oil was rich in what we now know as vitamin A, crucial for vision. Physicians in ancient Egypt and Greece recommended it. In China, powdered liver was wrapped in food or dropped into broth. Sometimes it was applied to the eyes directly, sometimes eaten over weeks, and over time, many saw the difference. Today, vitamin A deficiency is still treated with supplements, but the ancient world found its answer in the sea. So next time you glimpse stars twinkling in the dark, remember a time when light returned, through something deep and oily and strange. Isn't it magical how fish gave back the night? You might be wondering, how could a creature of the night calm the storms of the brain? In medieval Europe and parts of early Asia, bat blood was once used as a remedy for epilepsy. It was consumed in small amounts or mixed into potions thought to tame seizures. Bats were creatures of contradiction, silent but swift, feared yet revered. Their erratic flight was linked, symbolically, to the jerks and trembles of epileptic fits. And so, through sympathetic reasoning, their essence might counter the condition. There's no scientific support for bat blood as a treatment, but the ritual, quiet, intense, secretive, speaks to the desperation and care behind ancient medicine. It wasn't cruelty, it was hope, shaped by darkness. So tonight, if your thoughts flutter like wings, remember the world once looked upward, even at bats, for healing. And isn't that a tender paradox? Dear listener, let's walk into the highlands of Scandinavia, where the air smells like stone and moss. There, healers once gathered lichen, especially Iceland moss, and boiled it into bitter teas to soothe coughs and sore throats. The plant grows slowly, hugging rocks in silence, weathering snow and wind. And somehow, that resilience made it a medicine. Boiled with honey or milk, the drink coated the throat, reduced inflammation, and quieted irritation. Even today, lichen extracts are found in some herbal syrups. Lichens contain antimicrobial acids and mucilage, a sticky, soothing compound perfect for raspy lungs. The taste? Earthy, a bit like bark steeped in fog. So tonight, if you feel a tickle in your chest, think of the quietest things in nature, healing in silence. Isn't it poetic how a whisper from the rocks became a balm for the voice? You are now seated in a Persian court, its floors covered in soft silk. Before you, a royal physician grinds a gemstone with delicate hands. Crushed emeralds, mixed into elixirs, were believed to counteract poison. Why? Because emeralds symbolized clarity, balance, and purity. What better to combat corruption within the body? In texts from ancient India, Arabia, and Europe, emeralds appear again and again as antidotes, especially for kings. The idea was more spiritual than chemical. Though some believed the stone could draw out toxins, its real purpose was to reassure, to protect. Sadly, it didn't work, but it gave the illusion of safety, and sometimes that was enough. So tonight, rest beneath your invisible crown and know this: even beauty was ground into hope. Isn't that a soft kind of alchemy? Hey, friends, let's follow the scent of something golden and warm. In India and Southeast Asia, turmeric was not just a spice, it was a medicine. A bright yellow root, dried and ground, then mixed with water or oil to create a paste for swollen joints and sore muscles. The active compound, curcumin, has anti-inflammatory properties. Today, it's backed by science, but ancient wisdom knew it by feel. It was rubbed gently into knees, backs, wrists, sometimes warmed, sometimes chilled, always bright, always bold. The paste stained skin and cloth, but often brought relief. So tonight, as your limbs settle beneath soft covers, remember a root from the earth that glowed like sunlight. And isn't it wonderful how pain once met its match in gold? You are reclining on a Roman couch. The meal has ended, and your physician brings lettuce soaked in wine. Strange bedtime snack? Not entirely. Romans believed lettuce had calming properties. Combined with wine, it was used to induce sleep or reduce anxiety. The bitter sap in some lettuce species, called lactucarium, acts as a mild sedative. Even Galen recommended it for the restless. Soaked, chewed, or brewed into tea, it became part of the evening ritual for many households. And the feeling? Drowsy, light, a quiet descent. Modern studies show that lettuce's natural compounds may indeed have gentle sleep-inducing effects. So tonight, as your mind unwinds, picture the soft crunch of leaves steeped in calm. Isn't that a dreamy kind of dinner? Dear listener, let's step into a Roman stable at dawn. The horses snort, paw the ground, and a curious remedy begins. To combat hair loss, some Roman physicians advised rubbing horse saliva onto the scalp. Why? Because horses had strong, lustrous manes, and perhaps, through symbolic magic, their vitality could be shared. The method? Simple. A cloth, a muzzle, a bit of luck. Of course, it didn't grow hair, but the belief lingered, tied to animal power, physical beauty, and ancient longing. So tonight, if you run a hand through your own hair, remember the quiet stables of history. And isn't it tender, the lengths will go to feel whole again? You are now sitting in a library in medieval Baghdad. Shelves curve around you like walls of thought. And in your palm, almond oil. Scholars once believed that almonds, soaked in oil or eaten raw, could strengthen memory and clarity. They were called seeds of thought, their shape mimicking the brain's folds. Almond oil was mixed with herbs, applied to the temples, or taken with milk at dawn. Modern science shows almonds are rich in vitamin E and fatty acids. nutrients that support brain health. So perhaps they were on to something. So tonight, as your mind drifts into dreams, picture a tiny nut holding wisdom in its shell. Isn't that a sweet thought to carry you off? Hey friends, let's end this part of our journey by the firelight of an old Scandinavian home. A burn stings. The healer steps forward with a bowl. Inside, goat fat and ash from birchwood. This mix, cooled and spread over skin, was used for burns. The fat protected, the ash dried the wound. Together they sealed the pain. No sterile gauze, no hospital room, just hearth, hand, and habit. Today we understand the risks of unsterile methods, but sometimes they helped. A little. Enough. So as your body rests, imagine that mix of smoke and care, sealing pain beneath snow-colored balm. Isn't it peaceful, how healing once rose from flame? You're in a stone-walled apothecary in ancient Greece. Light filters through olive branches outside. Inside, a small vial of ox gall rests beside copper instruments. Gall, the greenish fluid from the liver of an ox, was believed to cure eye infections. Physicians like Hippocrates and Galen prescribed it for inflamed eyelids and blurred vision. They'd mix it with honey or vinegar, apply it with linen, and wait. And there was reason to try. Gall contains bile salts, which can break down bacteria. Honey added antimicrobial power. The mix, pungent and odd, sometimes worked. It wasn't pleasant, but in scrolls and temples this strange cure lived on. Today we clean with saline and drops, but long ago bile and sweetness shared the burden of healing. So tonight, let your eyes rest gently, and know that even in bitterness, there once stirred a hope for sight. Isn't that a strange kind of clarity? Hey friends, come in from the frost. The hearth is glowing, and in a black pot, turnips simmer. In ancient European villages, especially in the cold seasons, boiled turnips were used to ease coughs and bronchial troubles. Softened in broth, mashed with butter, or pressed into poultices, they brought warmth from within. Turnips are rich in vitamin C and have expectorant properties. Warmed and sweetened with honey, they calmed sore throats and opened congested chests. It wasn't magic, just a quiet vegetable, made generous through fire and time. Some tucked slices into cloth and laid them on aching lungs. Others drank the broth slowly, like a lullaby for the lungs. So tonight, as your own breath deepens, think of turnips, earthy, humble, and healing. Isn't it tender? How warmth found its way into the body? You are now seated in a candlelit chamber of medieval Italy. A physician unwraps a pouch. Inside, the powdered remains of a dried toad. For centuries, this was believed to treat gout, fiery pain in the joints, especially the feet. The toad, seen as cold, damp, and sluggish, was thought to counteract heat and inflammation. Prepared carefully, dried and ground into powder, it was mixed with herbs or wine, applied topically, or sometimes consumed in small doses. The effect? Likely placebo, or sometimes poisoning. But the toad's symbolism was potent, a creature of stillness against the fire of pain. Even alchemists held the toad in reverence. Some believed it guarded hidden healing. So tonight, if your joints ache a little under the covers, remember the strange things we've crushed, in search of comfort. Isn't it wild how medicine once hopped between fear and faith? You're stepping barefoot through the tall grass of the Amazon. A healer squats beside a patient, holding a line of leaf-cutter ants. He takes one, presses its jaws onto a wound, then breaks off the body, leaving the jaws clamped like stitches. Over and over until the cut is sealed. But in some cultures, ants weren't just sutures. Their crushed heads, especially from fire ants, were powdered and applied to wounds. The bite? Sharp. The cure? Unusual. Ants carry formic acid and antimicrobial agents. In small doses, they may have prevented infection or simply formed a natural scab. The practice was short, precise, and performed with awe. So tonight, if you feel fragile, remember the smallest creatures once sealed our skin. Isn't that beautifully unexpected? Dear listener, take a breath. Now imagine you're in the highlands of ancient Wales. A shepherd child wheezes softly by the fire. The elder places sheep lungs in boiling water, then directs the steam toward the child's face using a woolen funnel. It sounds strange, but sheep lungs, spongy, porous, full of breath, were thought to bring back the rhythm of calm respiration. The steam loosened mucus, the heat opened airways, and the symbolism, the breath of another creature, comforted those who gasped. No scientific proof, but in a world of mist and memory, breath shared was breath returned. So tonight, as your chest rises and falls, think of the quiet wisdom in old remedies. Isn't it kind how we used breath to give back breath? You are now beside a volcanic spring in ancient Anatolia. Steam swirls up like mist from the earth's lungs. A clay pit bubbles nearby. People come with aching knees, swollen fingers, tired bones. They lower themselves into warm mud, rich in minerals, dense with history. Mud therapy wasn't just spa luxury, it was healing. Minerals like magnesium and sulfur soothed inflammation. The weight of the mud gave a sense of being held. Romans bathed in it, Egyptians too. From Iceland to Japan, warm earth cradled weary bodies. The smell, earthy, the feeling, like sinking into silence. So tonight, as your joints rest easy, think of mud not as mess, but medicine. Isn't it grounding, how healing once rose from below? Hey friends, drift with me now under the sea. In medieval Islamic medicine, crushed coral was dried, powdered, and given to those with nervous hearts. Coral, they believed, carried the rhythm of the ocean, the calm pulse of tides. It was used in elixirs, often with rosewater or saffron. The color, deep red or pink, was said to cool the blood and slow racing thoughts. Coral contains calcium and trace minerals, but the real healing lay in metaphor, steady, strong, shaped by the sea. So tonight, if your heart beats a little faster than usual, think of coral, silent, enduring, sculpted by water and time. Isn't it peaceful how the sea once calmed the pulse? You're now in a farmhouse in 18th century Germany. A child sniffles in bed. The mother reaches for a pot of goose fat. She rubs it into the chest, under the nose, behind the ears. Sometimes mixed with mustard or camphor, goose grease was the vapor-rub of its time. Why geese? Their fat was soft, abundant, and warming. It held heat like a blanket. For centuries, this was the trusted cold remedy across Europe. No miracle cure, but soothing. The scent, the warmth, the touch. So tonight, as you tuck in warm, think of a goose's quiet gift. Soft, strange, and strangely effective. Isn't it lovely how care smells like home? Dear listener, your head aches, your skin burns, but your feet? Cool them. Ancient Greek and Roman physicians recommended soaking feet in cold water and vinegar to reduce fever. The theory? Draw the heat downward, pull it away from the head and heart. Vinegar stimulated circulation. The cold grounded the body. It didn't cure the illness, but it offered relief. Some added herbs, thyme, lavender, chamomile. Others just sat still, soaking, waiting for the storm to pass. And the feeling? Like standing in a stream of calm. So tonight, if your mind races, think of feet in cool water, and vinegar drawing heat into stillness. Isn't that a gentle release? You are in a merchant house in Tang Dynasty, China. A child's nose bleeds. The elder reaches for silk, not to wipe, but to burn. Burnt silk, crumbled into ash, was applied just inside the nostrils. The fine powder was believed to staunch bleeding quickly. Silk, derived from silkworms, was seen as pure and harmonious. When burned, it left a soft, sterile ash that clung to the wound. It may have worked, absorbing blood, drying the source, sealing it gently. And the act? Careful, beautiful even. So tonight, if you feel overwhelmed, remember that something delicate once calmed the rush. Isn't that a soft kind of stillness? Hey friends, if you love this series, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next gentle chapter in our healing journey. Hey friends, let's drift out to sea where strange things float just beneath the surface. In medieval Arabia and Renaissance Europe, ambergris, hardened whale vomit, was prized as a remedy for headaches. When softened with oil or worn in satchels near the chest, its musky scent was believed to clear the mind. Ambergris forms in the gut of sperm whales and washes ashore like waxy treasure. Perfume makers adored it. Physicians saw it as calming, even mystical. The aroma? Deep, earthy, slightly sweet, not unpleasant, and oddly grounding. Today, its use is rare, and alternatives have replaced it. But once, people soothed pain with the scent of the sea. So tonight, breathe deeply. Imagine ocean winds carrying strange gifts. Isn't it lovely how even the oddest things found a place in healing? You are now sitting beside a fire in 15th century Prague. A woman trims a lock of hair and tosses it into the flames. Once reduced to ash, she gathers it carefully, then sprinkles it into a cloth to stop a nosebleed. Hair ash was believed to have drying and sealing properties. This folk cure was practiced across Europe. The hair came from the patient, or someone trusted. Symbolically, it formed a bond between the body and its remedy. Modern medicine doesn't recommend it, but the ash likely helped clotting, at least briefly. So tonight, if something feels broken or leaking within, think of the small ways we tried to patch ourselves. Isn't it tender how healing once came from our own strands? Dear listener, the candle flickers low in a 12th century apothecary. A crimson liquid glows in a glass jar. It's beetroot juice, pressed and poured for purification. Healers believed it cleansed the blood, lightened the heart, and revived pale cheeks. And maybe they weren't far off. Beets contain nitrates that improve circulation and lower blood pressure. Iron helps restore energy. Mixed with honey, cinnamon, or wine, it became both tonic and treat. So tonight, as your blood moves gently beneath your skin, picture a root pulling minerals from deep soil. Isn't it beautiful how Earth gave color back to the body? You might be wondering, how can a mouse help a wart? In Elizabethan England, and even earlier, healers sometimes wrapped a wart in the skin of a freshly caught mouse. The logic? As the mouse decayed, the wart would die. It was tied with thread, worn hidden beneath sleeves. Some whispered spells as they applied it. Others offered it silently, with hope. No modern science supports it, but in folklore it was a blend of patience, faith, and nature's smallest creature. So tonight, if something lingers longer than it should, remember how gently we once asked it to leave. Isn't that a curious kind of magic? Hey friends, dim the lights and step into a sunlit Roman bathhouse. Among the steam and marble, a woman pours warm goat's milk into the pool. It's creamy, soft, and full of lactic acid, long before science gave it a name. Goat's milk contains natural fats and proteins that soothe dry skin. Ancient queens like Cleopatra bathed in it daily. Others added honey or rose petals. The scent, light and sweet. The effect, silky calm. Even today, goat milk soap and creams echo that ancient ritual. So tonight, imagine soaking in milk and sunlight. Isn't it gentle? How luxury and healing once mingled in still water? You are curled up in a wooden bed, somewhere in 17th century Poland. Outside, snow falls softly. Inside, a baked apple is cut in half and pressed warm against your ear. The healer hums while holding it there. Apples were believed to draw out bad humors. The warmth soothed pain. The steam softened wax. Sometimes cloves or cinnamon were added for extra effect. It wasn't a cure, but it was comfort. So tonight, if your head feels heavy or your heart aches gently, remember the soft sweetness of baked fruit pressed close. Isn't it beautiful how healing once smelled like dessert? Dear listener, you're now at a market stall in ancient Damascus. On the table, small glimmering stones. This is alum, a mineral salt used for everything from tanning leather to stopping bleeding. But one of its gentlest uses? Healing mouth sores. Crushed and applied directly to a canker sore, alum draws out moisture, reducing swelling and speeding healing. It stings, but then soothes. Even today, alum appears in some natural remedies and dental powders. So tonight, if words feel hard to say, think of quiet crystals dissolving discomfort. Isn't that a peaceful hush inside the mouth? You're now in a cottage near a dark forest. A hunter returns, pale and clutching his stomach. The healer doesn't panic. She reaches for bread. But not fresh bread, charred, burned, black as coal. Ground into powder and mixed with water, it becomes a rudimentary version of activated charcoal, used to absorb poisons. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and medieval herbalists knew that burned toast or barley could draw toxins from the body. It didn't always work, but sometimes it did. So tonight, as you rest, remember how even ruined things once saved lives. Isn't it reassuring how failure became remedy? You might be wondering, what did people use before toothpaste? In parts of ancient Europe and Asia, crushed pine cones, ground fine and mixed with salt or ash, were used to scrub teeth. Resinous, gritty, fragrant. Pine cones carry antiseptic oils, the texture polished enamel. Some recipes included herbs like mint or myrrh. It wasn't as smooth as modern paste, but it worked. So tonight, when you brush your teeth, think of pine forests, needles underfoot, and someone long ago doing the same beneath the stars. Isn't that a quiet echo across time? Hey friends, let's close tonight's journey in a humble garden. In ancient Persia, carrots were more than food. Grated, warmed, and wrapped in cloth, they were pressed against wounds to draw out infection. Carrots contain beta-carotene and mild antiseptics. When mashed into a pulp, they absorbed pus, reduced swelling, and soothed skin. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Garden medicine made with care. So as you sleep tonight, picture orange roots grown in silence, waiting to be called upon. Isn't it lovely how healing once came from beneath the soil? You are deep in the forests of medieval Eastern Europe. A soft wind moves through the trees, and in a cabin lit by oil lamps, a healer stirs snake fat into a warming balm. Used for joint pain and stiffness, especially rheumatism, this fat was believed to hold serpentine flexibility. Some rubbed it directly into knees or knuckles. Others mixed it with beeswax and herbs like rosemary or juniper. Why snakes? Because they slither, stretch, and twist. Their bodies seemed immune to stiffness. And while modern science raises eyebrows, snake fat does contain fatty acids that may reduce inflammation. Mildly, perhaps, but enough for some to feel relief. So tonight, as your joints rest and the world grows still, imagine a coiled creature offering you its silence and ease. Isn't it curious how healing once slithered in from the wild? Hey friends, you are now in a quiet French village where a mother holds a baby in one arm and a cabbage in the other. For centuries, steamed cabbage leaves were laid across swollen breasts to ease engorgement during breastfeeding. The leaves cooled just enough, shaped perfectly to the body. It sounds strange, but cabbage contains anti-inflammatory compounds and cooling moisture. The pressure and shape brought comfort where little else could. Midwives used it, grandmothers passed it down. No medicine, just garden care. So tonight, think of warmth, breath, and the gentlest green remedy. Isn't it peaceful how nourishment gave comfort in return? You are now walking a dusty path in ancient Assyria. In your satchel, dried licorice root, sweet, fibrous, a bit sticky to the touch. Used across the ancient world, from Mesopotamia to China, licorice root was brewed into teas or chewed directly for stomach ulcers and sore throats. The compound glycyrrhizin soothes inflammation, helps the lining of the stomach, and reduces acid. Modern versions of it still exist in medicine today. But back then, it was pulled from the earth, cut into sticks, and offered with quiet hope. So tonight, if your stomach stirs or your voice feels worn, imagine this simple root, softening discomfort with sweetness. Isn't it lovely how candy once healed? Dear listener, you're now in a Mughal palace, its walls glinting with jewel tones. A servant brings a small porcelain bowl inside pearl powder crushed with mint and salt. To clean teeth, polish breath, and preserve beauty, royalty once brushed with this soft shimmer. Pearls are made of calcium carbonate, just like enamel. Gentle abrasion, cooling effect, and symbolic grace. A kind of elegance for the mouth. It didn't fight cavities, but it did freshen, brighten, and restore confidence. So tonight, as your smile softens into sleep, imagine brushing with the moon. Isn't it dazzling how beauty and healing shared a mirror? You are seated beside a crackling fire, somewhere in ancient Britain. The healer stirs tea made from ash tree bark. Bitter, dark, steaming. Used to reduce fever and inflammation, this bark contained salicin, much like willow, a precursor to aspirin, a forest cure. Drunk slowly, it lowered body heat, soothed chills, and calmed aches. Not pleasant in taste, but effective. So tonight, as your temperature evens and comfort settles in, think of trees standing still through storms and offering shelter. Isn't it grounding how bark once cooled the fire within? Hey friends, take a deep breath. You're in a Roman villa garden. Nearby grows a weed called goosefoot. Common, leafy, overlooked. Boiled into broth, it was served to those with stomach trouble, especially constipation. The leaves were rich in fiber and minerals, with mild laxative effects. Not glamorous, but it worked. And today, goosefoot's relatives, spinach, quinoa, still nourish us. So tonight, as your body resets and gently lets go, remember, the cure once came from a weed by the wall. Isn't that humble and quietly effective? You're now watching a mother in medieval Ireland melt a pat of butter over the fire. She pours it gently onto a child's finger, not for food, but for a splinter. Warm butter softened skin, loosened the wound, and drew the splinter out. Sometimes it was mixed with sugar, garlic, or plant resin. It wasn't sterile, but it helped, and it smelled like safety. So tonight, if something small still lingers beneath your thoughts, think of butter's warmth, easing it free. Isn't that a soft solution to sharp pain? Dear listener, imagine the smell of vinegar drifting through an old Turkish kitchen. Healers soaked crushed eggshells in vinegar, letting them dissolve partially, then applied the mixture as a poultice to bruises and sprains. The acidity pulled minerals from the shell, creating a paste rich in calcium. The coolness calmed swelling. The ritual? Careful, intentional. Some say it didn't work. Others swore by it. So tonight, picture the alchemy of egg and acid, transforming pain into peace. Isn't that quietly clever? You are now in a Bedouin tent, the desert wind brushing gently at the flap. Inside, a child is ill. The elder roasts date pits over coals, crushes them to powder, and stirs them into goat milk. Roasted date stones were used to treat diarrhea and soothe the gut. High in fiber, antimicrobial in heat, and rich with desert memory. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. So tonight, remember, even the pit, once discarded, had a purpose. Isn't it calming how waste became remedy? Hey friends, let's close this chapter in a garden of color. In medieval monasteries, monks crushed marigold petals, calendula, and pressed them into salves for cuts, burns, and rashes. The flower, golden and resilient, held antifungal and antibacterial compounds. Even today, calendula creams soothe the skin. But long ago, it was just petals, oil, and a prayer. So tonight, let your skin rest beneath your blanket. Let it be soft, whole, and golden in spirit. Isn't it beautiful how flowers once closed wounds? Hey friends, the fire is glowing low, and someone brings a soft cotton sock filled with warm salt. In homes from Eastern Europe to the Appalachian Mountains, this was the go-to remedy for earaches. Coarse salt was heated in a pan, poured into a sock or cloth, then gently pressed against the sore ear. Why salt? It held heat steadily. It pulled moisture, and its weight soothed throbbing. Sometimes herbs like lavender or chamomile were mixed in. The scent, the warmth, the weight, all helped. Not a cure, but a comfort. Even today, some still reach for this homemade bundle in the quiet hours of pain. So tonight, if anything aches inside, imagine that warmth cradling you gently. Isn't it sweet? How healing once came from the kitchen drawer. You are now seated beside a cooking hearth in 17th century Spain. A child has hiccups. Laughter turns to frustration. Then someone lights a feather. The smoke from a burnt feather was waved beneath the nose, believed to shock the body back into rhythm. Hiccups, after all, are a rhythm gone rogue. It tickled, it distracted, sometimes it worked. This strange remedy wandered through folk medicine across continents. The feather was often from a chicken or duck, soft, familiar, oddly magical. No one knew why it helped, but every home had a feather. So tonight, if your body jumps unexpectedly, remember how the lightest things once brought us back to stillness. Isn't that whimsical healing? Dear listener, the cold bites your cheeks as you step into a Polish farmhouse. On the table, fresh horseradish, grated fiercely. Mixed into a paste and inhaled gently, horseradish was used to clear sinus blockages, reduce mucus, and bring tears to the eyes. On purpose. It's spicy, sharp, pungent, but it works. Horseradish contains volatile oils that stimulate circulation and thin mucus. Even today, horseradish root remains a folk remedy for colds and sinus infections. The experience, intense, but sometimes relief follows fire. So tonight, if your head feels heavy, imagine that pungent root slicing through fog. Isn't it bold? How healing sometimes stings before it soothes? You're in a stone cottage in ancient Greece. A child scratches at her scalp. The healer brings a bowl of crushed mint leaves and vinegar. Mint cools the skin. Vinegar loosens the grip of lice eggs. Together they formed a remedy both soothing and cleansing. The mixture was massaged into the scalp, left to sit, then rinsed with water, sometimes infused with rosemary or lemon peel. It smelled fresh, it tingled, and it often worked. Even now, some natural lice treatments still echo this formula. So tonight, think of how green leaves and tart patience chased away tiny troubles. Isn't it refreshing? How nature cleaned what bothered us most? Hey friends, take a stroll with me into a forest clearing somewhere in early Korea. Underfoot, acorns crunch softly. Roasted, ground, and brewed into a tea or porridge, acorns were used to treat digestive issues, especially diarrhea. The tannins in acorns have astringent properties. They slow the gut, calm the lining, restore rhythm. They had to be processed carefully, leached of bitterness, roasted with care. But for those who knew, they were powerful medicine. So tonight, if your stomach feels tender, remember how even a fallen nut offered quiet healing. Isn't that grounding? You are now seated in a sun-washed courtyard in ancient Rome. A mother rocks her baby, who cries through the night. She brings a small pot to boil, inside fennel seeds. Strained and cooled, the water is given to the infant in drops. Fennel calms gas, reduces bloating, and soothes muscle spasms. Modern studies confirm its carminative effects. But long before science, mothers knew. It's still used today in teas and gripe water. So tonight, as the world hushes, think of sweet, licorice-scented seeds singing the body back to calm. Isn't it soft, how plants hush our smallest sorrows? Dear listener, you are in a Moorish kitchen garden. A bundle of rosemary is burning in a clay oven. Once reduced to ash, it's mixed with salt and applied to swollen gums. The idea? To draw out infection, reduce swelling, and offer relief. Rosemary contains antimicrobial compounds. Burned, it becomes drying and mildly astringent. The blend was rubbed gently inside the cheek. No anesthesia, just herbs and resolve. So tonight, if something aches behind the scenes, think of herbs turned to dust, still offering care. Isn't that quietly brave? You are now in a Parisian chamber during the Renaissance. A lady peers into her mirror, dabbing her skin with lemon juice. Not to harm, but to lighten. Freckles were seen as imperfections. Lemon, with its acid and vitamin C, gently bleached them over time. It tingled, sometimes stung, but it worked, slowly. Even today, lemon is found in brightening creams, and the ritual remains. So tonight, whether you celebrate your freckles or not, remember, healing is sometimes a kind of light. Isn't that a luminous idea? Hey friends, breathe deeply. You're in a coal-heated flat in 19th century London. A cloth is laid out, mustard powder, flour, water. It's spread and folded, then pressed onto the chest, a mustard plaster. Used to treat congestion, the mustard stimulates circulation, warms the skin, and breaks up phlegm. The heat could be intense, sometimes too much, but many found relief. So tonight, as your breath steadies, think of warmth spreading like fire across a cold chest. Isn't that the essence of comfort? You are now near the River Nile. A fig is split open, sweet, soft, sticky, and pressed onto a skin boil. Figs were used to draw out infection. Their enzymes softened skin. Their sugars nourished healing. Wrapped in linen and refreshed daily, the fig worked like a gentle magnet, pulling discomfort to the surface. Even Hippocrates praised them. So tonight, if something within feels swollen or stuck, think of fruit giving more than sweetness. Isn't that a ripe reminder of quiet care? Hey friends, dim the lights and picture a quiet stream flowing beside a walnut grove. In the ancient world, crushed walnut shells were ground into fine particles and rubbed gently onto the skin to exfoliate and renew. Egyptians, Persians, and later Europeans used it to remove dead skin, calluses, and blemishes. The shell's texture, when powdered just right, was gentle enough to scrub without tearing. Mixed with oil, milk, or honey, it became a simple beauty ritual, shared by soldiers and queens alike. No chemicals, no fragrances, just the dry husk of a tree, softened by touch. So tonight, imagine yourself rinsing off time with something humble and earthy. Isn't it comforting? How roughness became softness through care? You are now in an Egyptian courtyard. A physician carefully scrapes bark from the root of a pomegranate tree. The bitter outer bark was steeped and sipped as a remedy for intestinal worms. Its alkaloids paralyzed parasites, allowing the body to expel them safely. This remedy traveled across Persia, Greece, and India. Pomegranate, a symbol of life, ironically helped banish unwanted guests from within. It worked, often and impressively. So tonight, if something invisible troubles you, remember that even the tree of sweetness had a bitter shield. Isn't that a quiet paradox? Dear listener, breathe in the soft scent of roses. In medieval Persia and India, crushed rose petals were mixed with cool water or wine to reduce fevers. The petals were infused, strained, then gently dabbed on the skin or served as a drink. Roses, beyond their fragrance, contain natural cooling and anti-inflammatory compounds. The effect was subtle, but soothing. Sometimes rose water was sprinkled on bed linens. Other times petals floated in copper bowls beside the sick. So tonight, as your body settles into stillness, imagine healing not as fire, but as bloom. Isn't that a delicate way to bring down heat? You're seated by the Aegean Sea. A fisherman hands a healer the bone-like shell of a cuttlefish, chalky white, porous, shaped like a feather. Ground into fine powder, this shell was used as an antacid in ancient Greece and Rome. Rich in calcium carbonate, it neutralized stomach acid and soothed indigestion, sometimes mixed with mint or fennel, sometimes taken alone with water. Even today, cuttlebone remains in use for birds, for polishing, and for certain traditional medicines. So tonight, if your belly whispers restlessly, think of the sea's softest armor, turned inward to calm. Isn't that beautifully strange? You are walking a foggy path in Celtic Britain. Ivy climbs every stone, green even in winter. Healers once crushed ivy leaves into poultices or teas for bronchial infections. Its compounds relaxed airways, calmed spasms, and encouraged mucus to move. The dose had to be small. Ivy is strong, but when used properly, it soothed deep coughs. Even now, ivy leaf extract appears in modern herbal syrups. So tonight, breathe deeply and think of a vine that never gave up on green. Isn't it fitting how something clinging brought relief? Hey friends, in a quiet Roman kitchen, barley simmers beside bread dough. Crushed and blended into paste, barley was applied to inflamed skin, rashes, or burns. Its starches created a soft, cooling barrier. Mixed with milk or olive oil, it soothed itching. Sometimes lavender or chamomile was added. Even gladiators used it to calm sword burns and armor chafing. Today, oatmeal carries a similar story, but barley got there first. So tonight, let your skin settle and think of grain lending its softness to the body. Isn't that a nourishing thought? You are standing in an Indian village as the sun sets. Smoke rises from a sacred fire, dried cow dung, smoldering with neem leaves and ghee. This was used ritually to purify the home and, in cases of measles, believed to ease the patient's suffering. The smoke was thought to cleanse the air, repel evil, and reduce infection. Neem has real antimicrobial properties, and the warmth, the scent, the ritual offered comfort in chaos. Strange, yes, but full of meaning. So tonight, if something invisible lingers near, remember how smoke once carried both prayer and protection. Isn't that a sacred kind of care? Dear listener, the walls of ancient Alexandria shimmer white under the sun. And in the apothecary's jar, chalk. Crushed into powder, chalk was swallowed in small doses to neutralize heartburn and acid reflux. Its alkaline properties worked just like modern antacids. In medieval Europe, chalk was mixed with honey or herbs. Gentle, reliable. No flair, just geology turned into peace. So tonight, if fire rises where it shouldn't, remember the cool stillness of ancient stone. Isn't that a calming reversal? You are now in a Korean kitchen. A small crock gurgles gently with pickled garlic, aged in vinegar, mellowed by time. For generations, pickled garlic was believed to lower blood pressure, improve circulation, and warm the body. Modern studies agree garlic's allicin can indeed relax blood vessels, and fermentation makes it gentler to digest. Taken each morning, it was more than food. It was prevention, ritual, wisdom. So tonight, think of a single clove, warding off what cannot be seen. Isn't that quiet bravery in a bulb? Hey friends, let's end this part by the light of a smoky fire. In rural Russia and parts of India, a burnt onion, blackened over coals, was sliced and pressed against insect bites. The char neutralized venom. The juices cooled the sting. Onions contain sulfur and antioxidants. Burnt, they carry carbon's absorbent power. The smell lingered, but so did the relief. So tonight, if something small has pierced your calm, remember how even ashes could soothe. Isn't that a soft ending to a sharp problem? Hey friends, if you love this series, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the final 10 remedies still to come. Hey friends, imagine the damp morning of a Roman garden. Snails glide silently along terracotta walls. Their slime, clear, cool, and slightly sticky, was once collected to treat skin sores and inflammation. Roman physicians noted its soothing properties, especially for wounds that wouldn't close. The slime contains allantoin and glycolic acid, compounds that promote healing and regenerate skin cells. It's no surprise that snail mucin is still used in modern creams. Back then, it was pressed directly onto cuts or mixed with herbs into balms. So tonight, as your skin breathes beneath cotton sheets, remember the quiet trail of something soft and ancient. Isn't it beautiful how small lives leave healing behind? You are now in an orchard in ancient Persia. A healer cracks open apple seeds, not for planting, but for healing. Apple seeds were crushed and mixed into paste to expel intestinal worms. The bitter seed contains amygdalin, which in high amounts can be toxic, but in tiny doses was thought to cleanse. It was a delicate balance, risk and remedy side by side. The paste was taken with honey or milk, always under careful watch. So tonight, think of the seed inside the sweetness, hidden, potent, purposeful. Isn't it remarkable how the core held something unseen? Dear listener, the market smells of spice, clove, cinnamon, pepper. You pause by a stall where cloves are piled like tiny nails. Cloves were once chewed whole, pressed into sore gums, or mixed into pastes for dental pain. Their natural oil, eugenol, is still used in dentistry today. They numb, they calm, they even fight infection. Ancient Chinese, Indian, and Arab texts all praised this spice for its fiery kindness. So tonight, if your jaw tightens or your teeth remember old pain, think of spice hiding a quiet anesthesia. Isn't that a fragrant relief? You are now in the cool stone corridors of a Celtic fortress. A healer burns a goat's horn until it crumbles into fine ash. Applied gently to the nose, it was used to stop bleeding. The ash absorbed moisture, sealed vessels, and carried symbolic strength from the horn. The idea came from nature's logic, strong bone to stop weak flow. So tonight, if something spills inside you, thoughts, memories, silence, remember how ash once steadied blood. Isn't that a strong end for something fragile? Hey friends, the tide rolls in along an Aegean shore. Sea sponges were once dried, powdered, and steeped into teas for menstrual cramps. Their porous body held minerals thought to relax muscles and balance fluids. Greek women used it with honey, sometimes as a soak, sometimes as a drink. No lab, no label, just water, salt, and thyme. So tonight, if your body whispers from within, remember the sponge, soft, resilient, deeply alive. Isn't that a healing rhythm? You are in a desert village beneath a hot sun. A cactus is cut open, its flesh cool and full of water. Applied to burns and sun-scorched skin, cactus pulp, especially from prickly pear, was soothing and hydrating. It acted like a natural aloe. Aztec and North African cultures swore by it, thick, slick, and restorative. Even today, cactus extract appears in sunburn gels and cosmetics. So tonight, if your skin remembers the heat of the day, think of the desert's answer, green and patient. Isn't that a soft balm from a harsh world? Dear listener, step into a Han Dynasty apothecary. On a lacquered tray, the fine ash of a silk cocoon. Used to treat infections, this ash was applied to wounds. The silk's natural proteins and the fire's purifying touch made it both symbolic and functional. Silkworms spin a shield, and burned, that shield was offered back to others. So tonight, as your thoughts coil gently around you, imagine silk turn to smoke, then to medicine. Isn't that a quiet metamorphosis? You are now walking a forest path in medieval Scotland. Nettles sting your legs, but healers saw them as cure, not curse. Boiled into broth or mashed into poultices, nettles were used to ease arthritis and stiffness, rich in minerals, naturally anti-inflammatory. Some even brushed fresh nettles against joints to stimulate circulation. The pain was brief and often helpful. Today, nettle tea is still used for similar reasons. So tonight, think of how the sting became the soothe. Isn't that a reversal worth remembering? Hey friends, we end in a field of gold. Dandelion, seen as a weed by many, was medicine to ancient Chinese, Middle Eastern, and indigenous healers. The root, dried and brewed, helped cleanse the liver and stimulate digestion. It's a diuretic, a purifier, a tonic disguised in yellow petals. Taken in springtime, served with gratitude. So tonight, think of the things we toss aside that quietly cared for us anyway. Isn't that the truest kind of healing? You are now seated beneath stars in the Ethiopian highlands. A healer weeps beside her patient, intentionally. Tears were believed to carry cleansing spirit. Mixed into olive oil and warmed gently, they were used to soothe infected eyes. The salt, the warmth, the ritual, no ingredient was more human. It didn't cure, but it healed, emotionally, tenderly. So tonight, if you've cried recently or not in years, know this: tears were once medicine. Isn't that the gentlest closing to a long journey? Thank you for walking with us through 100 ancient remedies, from ash and oil to flower and flame. May your rest be deep, your curiosity fed, and your healing always gentle.